Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week, we talk about a different topic to do with work and share some ideas and actions to help all of us navigate these squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and control.
And every episode that we record on the Squiggly Careers podcast comes with a pod sheet. That's a one-page summary of all the tips and tools and resources that we refer to. And that is designed to help you take action, really, which is what we really care about. Also, one of the things that might be useful to you is to sign up to the Squiggly Careers in Action weekly newsletter. It's where we put all the links to the podcast, the pod sheet, other things we might have been reading, watching and listening to that we think might be useful for you. The links to those things are in the show notes, or you can just go to our website, amazingif.com, and you'll find everything you need right there.
So today we are talking about what I am going to guess will be quite a popular topic, which is why you don't delegate and what to do differently. And I think even if you think you're good at delegating, and I started this process thinking, oh, I'm good at this, so I'll be able to share my words of wisdom and what I do really well. And actually, the more I thought about it, the more I thought I am good at parts of this and not all of this. So to get us started, we've written some sort of I statements about why we don't delegate. So perhaps listen to these and think about which ones feel relevant for you. And some of them you might think, oh no, that's kind of not me. And then Helen and I have reflected on which ones kind of perhaps get in our way of delegating in a useful way at the moment. So kind of statement one, I can do it better. And none of us kind of like to say that out loud, but I think we think in our minds. Yeah, so like I can do that better. Or it might sound like I can do that faster. I think that's probably even more common than I can do that better. I don't want to overload the other person. So we know how busy everyone is. And you just think, oh, well, I don't want to add to that to somebody's kind of capacity challenges. They're already trying to prioritize 5 million things. Back to the time one, it's going to take me ages to teach someone to do this. So basically, I can't be bothered. You know, like I do think that's like, you do sometimes think, oh, that's so much energy and effort. I do think you need a bit of capacity actually to do this really well. So I think some people will think, I don't want this to come across as like a power play or a power structure, you know, almost like, well, what right have I got to delegate this to someone else? Even if perhaps you have got the right to do that, you know, you are leading a team, like, you know, you don't want to be like in charge of someone, and maybe in that way it can perhaps come across a bit command and control, I suppose.
Yeah, agreed.
I think there might be a practical thing. I just don't know how to delegate. I don't know how to ask somebody to do this. So because I sort of don't know the how, I just don't do it. I think this can be particularly hard. I was reading an interesting article about this. I don't know how to delegate to someone who's not in my team. So maybe you have got something to delegate, but they're in a different function. So kind of, I don't have that same level, you know, maybe of like commitment or care, and we're not one team. So that can feel really hard. So I was like, oh, that made me reflect on, like, that can feel a bit harder. And I think the last one is a really interesting one. I sort of don't even think about delegating. So we're so on autopilot almost of getting stuff done and taking the actions that we need to take that it almost doesn't even cross our minds. So it's not that you think you could do it better or you don't want to overload someone. You don't even think in the first place. There's not even a question in your mind of like, well, would this be something that would be useful for me to delegate? You're like, well, no, I have got so used to doing these things that I just keep on doing them. Which one of those for you, Helen? Which one is there one or two that sort of stand out for you?
Which one doesn't? I think my I statements. I don't know if I think I can do it better. It's not that. I think it's okay, well, I can just do it faster.
Yeah.
And that's a combination of, I don't want to spend the time teaching somebody, but it is more just like, okay, well, I can just do it faster. Like, I may as well just do it because I think I can do it faster and get it done quicker. That's probably my biggest I statement. I was also thinking when you were talking actually about, like, I don't know how to do it, particularly maybe if it's not in your team. I was also thinking it's quite useful to reflect on what direction of delegation feels more difficult. Like, would I find it more difficult to delegate to you than I would someone who works for me, for example? Or would I think sometimes because you might be like, oh, I find it really easy here, but this one feels a lot harder. And then you could ask yourself, well, why does that direction feel difficult? What's the thing that might be getting in the way? Because you might have different I statements that affect delegation with different people or different directions.
We were like, oh, maybe reflect on how comfortable and confident do you feel delegating on a kind of scale of 1 to 10. And I think my starting point is quite high. So I would be scoring myself a 7 or an 8, maybe slightly lower now I've thought about this a little bit more. But I think my starting point actually would have been 8. And I think the only thing that sometimes holds me back with delegating might be, have I got the energy and effort needed to upskill someone to do this? So I always feel really comfortable delegating to people. I hope I do some of the things in the right way. I often don't think that I could do it better or faster. I think probably because I'm not a fast person anyway. I'm not a you, as in I don't work as quickly as you do. So I would always be like, well, Helen can do this faster. Brilliant. Just delegate it to Helen. I think I really believe in like doing is how you learn. So yes, I might be able to do it better, but that's because I've had loads of practice or I've done it a lot. And so I don't expect it to be better from someone else. And then that feels fine because I'm like, well, I'll help along the way to make sure it gets to where it needs to get to. So I think mine is often just more of a question of like, oh, I'm not sure about giving that to someone else because I just feel like I know it's going to take a lot of energy on my part as well as on their part.
I often think because I hear you say that, often in contrast to something that I'm saying, which is like, I'll just do it. And you'll be like, oh, how's that help? You'll often challenge me when you say that. And I think probably one of the factors as well that's maybe different between us that affects the delegation skill is that I think you have a slightly more long-term view. So you'll be thinking about, well, what do I want to be doing in a year's time? Or what if this person could do that, then what could I be doing with that? You
Yeah,
have whereas I'm often like, well, it just needs to get done. It just needs to get done. It needs to get
yeah,
done this
like
week.
now.
Yeah, it needs
Yeah,
to get done now. And so I don't think, yeah, but if I don't delegate, I'm going to be doing it the next week and the next week and the next week.
yeah. Talk about your delegation boomerang that you were talking to me about.
The delegation boomerang is where this is like a mistake that I make that I don't think Sarah does. My delegation boomerang is where I'll delegate something to somebody. So I don't know, like somebody in the team or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, could you look at this? And then I will look at it and I'll think to myself, well, that isn't quite what I wanted it to look like. That's not either, it doesn't read the way I wanted it to look like, or it doesn't look the way I wanted it to look like, whatever it is. And so then I will just think, well, I'll just do it myself. And so things just keep coming back to me. And that happens like over and over again, is that I'll send something out, like I'll send
Yeah.
my little task out to someone, it'll reach someone, and then it just comes back to me. And I guess my reflection there is, because you have to think, well, that's your problem, Helen, not their problem. Like the pattern here is how you are delegating, because this is happening with lots of different people. And
Or
so I
people figured it out and they're just like, oh, if you just wait long enough, you just give it back to her and then she'll do it anyway.
yeah, you should just do it. I mean, yeah, that's probably what people think. But I think it is because I don't think I am communicating clearly my expectations. And then I think I probably don't collaborate with them in the process. I just sort of say, this is what I want doing, send it their way, and then it's done.
Yeah, and I think my delegation challenge is a bit different. I think sometimes what I'm not as good at is I'm okay at delegating, I'm okay at supporting through the process, but I am not clear enough early enough in what does good look like. I think because I naturally stay quite open and like to explore and might have a few different questions in my mind, I sometimes think that openness can create confusion rather than clarity. And what I do see that you are very good at is actually sometimes if you're in those conversations with me, let's say we're working on something together with someone else, I'm much more prepared to let something go and for it to take a bit longer and to kind of feedback as we go. I'm much more prepared to do that. But what you are very good at is, we might have quite a meandering conversation, which is a good thing. We're not saying we shouldn't have those conversations, but you are very good then at going, well, what matters most first, or what matters most now? And I sometimes think I have delegated things. Well, I know I have. I've delegated things where we have wasted some time because I haven't created that clarity. Or maybe I've thought I've created that clarity and then it becomes clear that I haven't because you're
Mm.
like, oh, this is not what we were expecting. And again, to your point, you have to take accountability for that, right? Because you're like, well, I have delegated that and clearly somebody's gone off and done something quite different or perhaps gone in too many different directions and you're like, well, that's because I wasn't clear enough on kind of the outcome, or sometimes maybe breaking down the delegation into, well, part one of this project looks like this, so do you know what, let's just focus on getting that right first and let's do that in the next 2 weeks and then we'll figure out the next bit from there. But because I sort of think about it all at the same time and act over loads of different time horizons all at the same time, I think for some people, they're just like, whoa, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And I'm like, oh yeah, but still ultimately I know I want a 5-page PowerPoint or whatever. But I've never quite distilled it enough. And that's actually been quite a big learning for me, because then I think that can feel quite demotivating for someone else.
I always think as well, you know, when I've had it in the past, when a senior person delegates to you and you care, you care about their opinion, you want to do a good job, you want to impress them, and you'll be listening to what they're saying. They're like, "Oh, Helen, could you lead this project?" And what I'm thinking about is this, and one of the other things that we could do is that, and blah blah blah. And they're kind of sharing a lot of ideas. And then the assumption I've had before is that I need to deliver. As part of the delegation is for me to take every single idea that they have said, and I need to do that. And they're like, oh, no, 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 no. There were like 5 ideas, but the thing that I really wanted you to do is just like run that meeting. That was the thing I was delegating.
I think I do that. I think what you are saying is that is you. And I'm like, that is me.
Kind of. It was just reminded me. And I think it's a bit of a watch out. If you are a senior person or you are the project lead or you are the manager, I think inevitably people who are working with you or for you, they want to look good in your eyes. I think that's sort of a natural kind of, I don't know, hierarchy we place on perception with people who are more senior than us. And so there is a risk that you kind of share all your ideas, which I know you. And so I'd be like, okay, well, that was 5 ideas, Sarah. Which one do we actually want to move forward? Like, I would just say it. But someone who doesn't have that confidence or just that relationship with you might assume that all those 5 ideas are things that actually need to be implemented by them, and that you're delegating all of that. And it's that can be, I think, overwhelming sometimes for people.
Also, hopefully, as sharing those examples, I think does show how easy it is to get this wrong.
Yeah.
And for someone like me, where I'm sort of going, well, I back myself with this. I think I'm quite good at this skill. I'm giving myself quite a high score. And then when I've really thought about it, I'm like, oh, actually, I can think of quite a lot of examples where I have got this wrong, even as something that I think I'm relatively good at least some of the time. So what we thought we would do is talk about 4 don'ts, and then kind of what is the opposite do when it comes to delegation. So the first one is don't delegate the how, but do delegate the what and the when, because that is how you create clarity. So I think sometimes this is what I do get wrong. So the reason you don't want to delegate the how is I think this can end up feeling demotivating. So this is when you do tell someone how to do their job, which I probably wouldn't do this bit, but I don't get the next bit right. So if someone, let's say Helen needs to do a presentation for a new client we might be working with in career development, I say to Helen, right, so can you get the presentation ready by 4 p.m. next Wednesday? And to do that, I'd suggest you get some slide headers ready first. And then this is what I think each of those headers should say. And probably what they should look a bit like this. And if I was you, I'd approach that by like doing an hour and a half each day, keep building on it. So I'm basically telling you exactly how to get that job done. And you're not giving people that kind of freedom to work in a way that works for them. Also, you are assuming that your way is the best way. So I always think try and give freedom and flexibility on the how, but do be really clear on what needs to be delivered by when. So I might say to Helen, let's get the first version of that presentation ready for that client. If you send it to me by 4 p.m. Wednesday, then we'll go through it together first thing on Thursday. Like you are left in no doubt about what needs to happen by when. And so I think the problem I have is I don't delegate the how, but I also don't delegate the what or the when. So I think I would be too vague here. I think I would say, oh, we just need to like explore getting a presentation ready for a client. And yeah, I'm really open to what that looks like, even when perhaps I'm not as open as I'm saying I'm open. Or I then throw 5 ideas at someone about what we could do or how we could approach that.
I was just thinking, I feel like we delegate okay to each other. Unless you want to give me some like feedback now. I feel like there is always quite a clear, like, okay, so you're going to go back to that person and the deadline for doing that is this. So actually, maybe there's a peer thing going on. Like we are peers without fear. I might go with that.
Yeah.
Like I have absolutely no fear of you coming back to me and going, you did like that wasn't very helpful. You're like, I think you would challenge me back, like, okay, I don't mind picking it up, Helen, but I don't know what it is that you need me to do. Like peers without fear is sort of, I think, why we are able to delegate to each other.
I also wonder whether I sometimes think a lot of what we do might have some kind of quite tight deadlines, and almost like if we don't do it by that point, it is not going to happen, or it's going to create, I can imagine quite quickly the consequences of not doing something. And like we feel that even small things that we miss create quite a few like implications around like time and other people and those sorts of things. Whereas perhaps with the team, I don't have that same sense of closeness because we work together so closely, you and I, and kind of are relatively interchangeable. So I can kind of feel the impact. It's like if I suddenly said to you next week, I need you to read the next copy edit of our book, and I'm giving you 24 hours notice, I know that that's not going to get done. I would know what your week looks and feels like. So I'd probably have the most empathy for you out of anyone because we're so similar kind of in our days today. And then perhaps you sometimes forget to extend that to everybody else because you're just not as close day to day. I think sometimes that was probably what I forget is like, oh yeah, say like everybody else in our team will have their own equivalent. So if I don't say this needs to happen by this point, I think I am most likely to miss the when. So I really appreciate it when people ask me that question. So that's one top tip that you can do, because obviously you can also be on the other side of this, right? You can be the person who's being delegated to.
Yeah.
If you ever have something that is delegated to you and you don't have clarity on the what and the when, ask for it. You will save yourself so much sunk cost and time and energy. When people ask me that, I never think, oh, that's annoying. What I actually always think is like, oh, that's such a good question. I'm always really pleased when people ask that question. So if that happens to you and someone you've got a me with 4 million ideas, just do those kind of like nice nudges, just do those prompts of like, okay, Sarah, so there's lots we could do, but like what matters most and when do you need me to do that by? Like keep asking that question because for someone like me, that's not a natural thing to think about. So I need to practice it to get better at it, but also people can help me by just asking me.
The next one is one that I don't do very well. So the don't here, and I get so annoyed that I do this, but the don't is don't delegate and then disappear. I think I do this quite a lot because I'm like, when I finally built up the like, oh, I should delegate this. It's the right thing to delegate this. Give someone else an opportunity. I'm like, right. I'd like you to like lead on this initiative. It needs to, I will probably do the what and the when, lead on the initiative, needs to be created. I'll probably do your first bit, all right. But then I just go, right, got it, all good. Right,
Bye.
fantastic. Bye. What happens is it goes quiet. It goes quiet. And then somebody quite late in the day will then ask for help. Like they'll be like, they've basically been struggling because I've just gone and I've just assumed that everything is totally okay. And that it's just tickety boo being done as I expect it to. And they've actually been struggling with it for way longer than they needed to, because I think I'm making the assumption that my way of delegating was, I gave them complete clarity and it's all fine. And they're probably thinking, oh, I don't want to go back to Helen because it's going to maybe look like I've not done it the way she wants it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So instead of delegating and disappear, don't do that. What you should do is delegate and then agree together what support looks like. Like, how can I best support you? So I might say to Sarah, I mean, it's obviously a bit weird because we're peers, but if I said to Sarah, oh, I would like you to lead on the podcasts for the next couple of months because I'm going to be working on this really big project over here. And I think that's important for the business. So I'd appreciate your help with it. Rather than just going, like, just leaving that with Sarah and Sarah thinking, well, I don't actually know what that means. Like, what are all the things that I would need to do? We haven't talked it through. I could then say to Sarah, in order for that to happen, what support would you need from me before the delegation happens, kind of during, what would that look like? And Sarah might say, oh, I could do with a couple of hours just talking through so I understand the process. Be good maybe after week 1 just to check in that everything's as we want it. And then you could probably back off then, Helen, to be honest. That conversation would look different for everybody. But the point is that before you disappear, you have asked the other person what they need in order to take that thing on from you successfully.
I also think sometimes people don't know what they need, but you are giving people permission to tell you along the way. So if I think about some of the things that I have delegated in our team, particularly if someone's doing something for the first time, that they wouldn't be able to tell me. Like we did some award entries recently. I might say to somebody, okay, well, I'm kind of delegating like the writing of that award entry. So do you know what? When you've just sort of written a first draft, doesn't matter kind of how scrappy or like work in progress it is, why don't you share that with me? And then why don't we get on a call together and just kind of go through it? And actually, that person gave me some feedback that they found it really helpful to see me going through it live. So rather than us kind of passing back and forward, it was just like, oh, let's work on it together. Because she could also sort of hear my thought process out loud. then she could go away and sort of refine it and work on it. And again, I left her to it for a bit. And then I sort of saw it when it was 90%. I think actually then you saw it when it was about 90%. So we both then saw it and we were like, okay, any final kind of tweaks and changes. And that felt like a really good way of delegating something really important, being involved enough, but where that person still they've done the hard work. It's sort of their achievement. What has kind of been written is definitely theirs. And so I think this can sometimes be as simple as and I've done this once with someone I worked for, where like once a week I would just do an update. The kind of classic, keep someone updated on if it's a bigger project that's been delegated to you. Once a week, like, this is what's happened, this is what's happening next, here's my latest version, if kind of that feels relevant. And I think often when you start to do that, also that person then grants you more and more space along the way, which I always kind of quite appreciated when people were delegating stuff to me. Often people are, unsurprisingly, more involved when maybe they don't know you as well, or they're like, oh, we're not sure how well Sarah's going to be able to do this. But the more you sort of show you can, and sometimes you can't, sometimes you do need the help along the way, often the more space you get in return. So number 3 is don't delegate and then do it for someone. If we obviously end up doing it for someone, just you can put yourself in that person's shoes quite easily and just imagine what that feels like. It probably reinforces any confidence gremlin someone's got. They think I'm not good enough. Comparison, they're so much better than me. They're smarter than me. Also, we know people get better by doing and by practicing. And so often it is harder to do this. It's harder to give feedback, and it is quicker to just do it for someone. But then you're sort of missing out on the benefit, like everybody is missing out. So it's the difference between, very practically, I would think about it, somebody's written something, you could either, you can add comments to documents, whether it's like a Word or a PowerPoint. You can either add comments or you can kind of make the changes directly. And I am definitely an add comments person. And I accept that means sometimes things take longer, and it might mean multiple comments and I might have to go back a few times. But I don't know, I think I have this thing of going, well, I don't think the right thing for me to do now is to just do it. Unless that person has said, I'm really stuck, I need an example. It would really help me to kind of see something. So I did have this week on something where someone said they'd had a go at something and they were like, oh, could you show me what you would do? And I was like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's not like I would never show an example, but I would really resist the temptation to then actually do the work.
I think this is what's behind my boomerang, and so it sounds so harsh to be like, oh, you're micromanaging people, but maybe that's what it feels like. My only issue with the sort of do, delegate, and then share feedback, because I definitely think that's the right thing to do. I think for the long term, that is definitely the right thing to do. But the thing that I struggle with is I think by doing. So, like if I looked at something, let's say there was a presentation and I'm like, do you know what? That's not got enough energy in it, which is like one of our values. And I can't then go, oh, so here are 5 things that you can. I feel like sometimes creatively, in order to get to the answer, I sometimes need to sort of do it. And sometimes I find what's almost more helpful for my brain, rather than writing comments, because I kind of have to do the work to get to the comments, is sometimes doing the changes, but while someone's watching me.
Yeah.
So that I'm like, okay, I'm going to change that deck because there's some things that aren't quite right in it. But it'd be really helpful if maybe like you're with me when I'm doing it, and then I can explain my thinking as I'm going through it. I would find that is almost it's a bit of a hybrid, because I am still doing it, but I'm talking through my thinking when I'm doing it. It's hard for me to get to the feedback without actually having done it.
As long as the other person who you are delegating to has seen it and can then apply it, because it is a bit harder when you're not if you were doing that with me, I'd be like, well, I'm not applying it, I'm not getting to do it. So if I work in the same way as you, I've not got to do the doing. Potentially it probably would work okay for me, but I'm less of a doer than you are. But if I'm like, oh, what happens if you get a Helen and a Helen?
I'll tell you what would happen. Helen would say to Helen, yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I've got it. You don't need to show me anymore. I've got it.
Yeah, you do say that, exactly like that. When you're trying to shut me down, you're like, yeah, I've got it. I'm like, all right,
I've got it. Enough.
Definitely not interested anymore. But I guess the thing that you can do here is ask the question of the person that you are delegating to, or people, and kind of going, how helpful was that as an approach? Do you think that would be helpful for next time? Because if you're doing that every time, it's obviously not working. You're just going kind of back in a cycle. If the next time round you're like, oh, actually, someone's seeing me do that in action has obviously actually really helped them, then you're like, that's all that really matters is you want the person to stay motivated and you want the other person to be able to keep learning.
So what I have done before is I've like edited the thing, the document or the presentation, whatever it is, I've edited it. And then because I have to do that to work out how to make it better. And then what I've done is a little video. Like I've literally put my
Yeah.
phone in front of like my screen and I've done okay, I just want to talk to the changes I've made and why I've made these changes so it makes it easier for you next time. And I have had good feedback about that approach. And that is probably more efficient than someone just sitting and watching me do it.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
So the last one is don't delegate it and expect it to be exactly as you would do it. Do delegate and spot what's better because, and I think this is it's a really important habit to build this one because it's so easy. You delegate something, you probably have got some view in your mind of what it could look like. Even like I've had it before where I've delegated like a document, and in my head, I've gone, oh, it's clearly a PowerPoint. Like it's clearly a PowerPoint. And then what's come back is like a Word document. And I'm like, well, no, I wasn't thinking Word. Like I was visually thinking PowerPoint.
That is actually quite a fun question. Like, what do you think in?
PowerPoint. What are you thinking?
Probably a Word document.
Do you really?
Yeah, of course.
Oh no.
Which tool best reflects your personality?
I mean, that is totally a podcast for another day. But on this last point of delegation, so just to go back to this one, this is don't delegate and expect it to be exactly what you would like it to be. You do delegate and spot what's better because. So rather than critiquing somebody and being like, oh, well, that's not quite, where that might be where your brain goes automatically because that's maybe where you started. Actually, really push yourself to think, okay, but what is better because of the way this person has done this? So I might think, actually, there is a lot more useful detail that has gone into that document than I could have put in the PowerPoint. And
Mhm.
actually, that's much more likely to be used as a pre-read for before a meeting so that we can actually have a really good conversation. Whereas my view probably would have been what I clicked through in the meeting. And so I wouldn't have had that depth. And you can say to someone like, I think actually what's worked really well with how you have approached this is dot dot dot.
Yeah.
One thing that might be even better for us to look at is how we create something that we can use in the meeting because we're not going to put that one up in the meeting. And I think it's just I think it's a nice habit to get into, like what is better because of the way that individual has approached this. Because I think delegation shouldn't just be do what I want you to do the way that I want you to do it because you miss out on the value of somebody else's experience and insights and ideas making that thing better than you could have done yourself. Like I think that's part of the payoff of delegating, not just getting it done, but someone doing it in a different way that hopefully might be a bit better to the way you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good habit because sometimes you are a bit surprised or it's not quite what you had imagined because most of us do have some sort of like visualization of how we imagine a task will get done, and it's a bit of unlearning and relearning here.
Mm.
I think you're like unlearning, oh well, that monthly report has to look in this way or it has to have these things, and kind of relearning, oh but now it looks different, so there will be some things that are better. Doesn't mean you can't say, oh, we still need that data point, or we still want to do it in this way, or I want it in PowerPoint, or whatever. If you're also thinking about that individual and helping them to kind of learn and grow, you also want to give people kind of confidence to like do things in their own way. We don't want people to be carbon copies of the people they work for. And
Yeah.
like everyone always says that, right? Like don't recruit in your like shadow, don't have more of the same because then you miss out on like the diversity of everybody's individuality, right? And all of their brilliance. And I think if you start to do this, you are saying, well, my way is the right way. And actually someone said this to me today. So they were talking about writing and our tone of voice at kind of Amazing If. And I think what she was essentially saying to me is some of what we do is an Amazing If tone of voice, but some is a Sarah tone of voice. And I said to her, well, actually, that's really useful feedback because it can't be a Sarah tone of voice because that's impossible, right? For people to deliver on. Because you're like,
Yeah.
basically in my head to be able to deliver on that really well. I was like, this has to feel like Sarah moves to Australia and abandons Amazing If and Helen. And this tone of voice has to live on like without me, like independent of me, because it's like, this is our brand and this is what we stand for.
I might probably add a few more exclamations into our copy if
And
you
not
go
adding
through.
it more. There are no exclamation marks in our tone of voice, and that will continue to be true because I wrote the tone of voice document. But like that's actually a really, really good insight, because you're like, if people are trying to write as if they were me, that's an almost impossible task. If people are trying to write as Amazing If and Squiggly Careers, simple, straightforward, short, the things that we kind of really care about, being really useful, kind of keeping energy. Maybe there's the argument for the odd exclamation mark for energy, mate, occasionally.
Yay! Oh my gosh, can we change our document so that in our values it says energy exclamation mark?
Very in capitals, very occasional exclamation marks. That I think is a really good example of that. If you are asking people to second guess what you would do, it makes delegation like you're not delegating effectively, I don't think.
I think it's a very nice note to end on, that delegation increases the diversity of thought and people's contribution. I think you go from, oh, delegation might be feeling difficult and I don't know how to do it, to actually delegation is a really inclusive way of making sure that, you know, different people can contribute to work, and you don't
bring
have
all
to
their
do it yourself.
amazingness.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you don't already, we always really appreciate it if you leave us like reviews or you share with other people, and subscribe. We read every single review, but you can also email us. We're Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com. Love hearing from you. We love your feedback. What's working well about the podcast? What are any even better ifs? Again, we read every single one, and they are always our moments of joy in a week. Like, they are always the kind of small things that you need where you're like having a hard day and someone does leaves a review and talks about the impact a podcast episode has had. So thank you to everyone who already does that, because we know that's a lot of you. But that's everything for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm back with you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.